Hey guys, Steve with BBQ Pit Stop. Today I'm going to show you how I like to trim and season a brisket. All right, let's get started with this brisket. Let's start out by talking about the anatomy of a brisket. There's a few different things I want you to be aware of. First, this top muscle is called the flat. That's where you will get your slices. You got a fat vein that separates the flat and the second muscle, which is the point. And then you have the fat cap here, which is the skin side of the cow. So flat and point. We're going to start trimming now. I always start with the flat side, and we're doing a basic trim right here. Is what we're going to show you is a real basic trim. I'm going to get some of this, what we call the decal, removed. This will just make it a little easier to trim. From there, I'm going to just start taking off some of the surface fat. I like to push from underneath to get it to raise the muscle a little bit. It makes it a little easier to trim. When trimming a brisket, it's really important to have a sharp knife, and I really prefer using a boning knife. This is a Kai Pro boning knife. So we're just gonna, we don't have to get it all. There's if you can see right here, this is called silver skin. When cooking for competitions, pretty much all competitive cooks will remove the silver skin, but for the backyard and feeding my friends and family, I don't worry about the silver skin. But I try to get most of this surface fat off. Some of that, if it's not too thick, it's going to render off, but I like to get a nice looking even season on there. That's why I remove that surface fat, because I want that seasoning to be on the surface of the meat. Another thing I want to bring your attention to is the grain of the brisket. As you can see, it's running like so. When this is all smoked and finished, we're going to want to cut this against the grain like so to get nice, short, connective tissue pieces or slices. It'll make your meat a lot more tender. So, all right, I'm going to remove a little bit more of this decal here. Just to get it out of my way. And then I'm going to just get rid of the rest of this surface fat up here. And make sure, like I mentioned earlier, make sure you're keeping your knife relatively flat to the surface of the meat so you're not cutting into the meat. You're just removing the fat from the surface. Pretty good on the top there, I think. You can always, when you're doing this, you can really nitpick and spend a lot of time removing that. But if this were for my friends and family, I would be satisfied with how that looks now. Now we're going to trim up the edges. As you can see, there's along this edge, the same side as the decal, it's usually browned. I always trim that off. I don't know if this is true, but I've been told by somebody who said it was true that that's from the processing of the cow. They steam the carcass, and so that's actually browned meat, and so it's partially cooked. But it's not something I want to serve my guests, and so I cut it off. So then I just go around the edges, look for anything that is going to be just hanging off like that. I'm going to go around here and trim that. I'm going to trim a little more of this fat off to where I'm getting into a little bit more of the flat and the point there. I'm going to cut off the extra fat on the end of the point here. And so you can see there's a bunch of fat on the end of that. I always cut that off. I'm keeping all these trimmings here just to give you an idea of how much you cut off. There's also a lot of times on a full brisket like this, a Packer brisket, you'll see just kind of a weird layer of fat right there with a piece of meat on it. I normally just get right beneath that piece of fat, the layer of fat, and trim that off. There's still a little bit of it. Little piece right there. Okay. From there, we're getting pretty close with this basic trim. To where, and you can, this decal right here, you can even take a little bit more of that off. And just careful that you don't cut into the flat while you're doing that. That's not going to render. I mean, you're going to end up throwing that away anyway after it's cooked, and so that's why I will remove that. And so now, that's the only other thing you can do when you're doing a basic trim is sometimes I flip it over, and on the bottom of the point, you'll see a piece right here that protrudes out that's much thicker than the rest, and I will level that out just to get it to be a little more even in thickness to where it will cook a little more even. I just do that. And so these trimmings can be saved and ground into burger or sausage if you like to do that kind of stuff. Another thing I'm going to do on this basic trim is I'm looking at the fat cap. I'm not really too concerned about the thickness of it over here. It's usually, unless it's abnormally thick, I'm just going to leave it alone. But up here on the point, as you can see, there's a piece of fat that is just really, I mean, that's, you know, an inch thick. So I'm going to cut that down a bunch. And just like so. Cut that off, maybe even a little bit more. So, all right, and then we'll flip it over. And from here, well, we could trim a little bit more off right here. From here, we'd be ready for this basic trim. If I were just cooking a brisket for my first couple times, this is about how I'd trim it. And now I'd be ready to season it and put it on the smoker.